finally being able to not only be strategic partners, but to be able to provide Intellect to all 20,000 employees across IHH markets. That's very meaningful to me because I've been in IHH for 10 years, and to see IHH embrace this and say, yes, our employees need a good solution and we're going to invest in it. To me, I'm also very proud. There's so much that I want to do, that we want to do. And sometimes I gotta be very careful when I bring an idea to Theo because he's, let's do it. And I'm like, let's prioritize a little bit. We have already gotten a very good step in when it comes to B2B. So one is how can we expand that beyond Asia, APAC to global, to beyond the global stage. I think that's really exciting. Nobody, I think, is afraid to fail in Intellect. I think I can speak for everyone because it's so collaborative. We make a decision and we back each other up, and even if we fail, we pick up, we move, and that's the spirit of a startup that I think Theo has successfully built for Intellect, and that's why all of us are comfortable working here. We're willing to push further and take risks together. What I learned is that every single person, no matter how high ranking they are, have the same self-doubt. And when I share my self-doubts with them and they become vulnerable and share with me, sometimes I'm just like, really? But you're like a group CEO of a huge organization. And I realize everybody does have self-doubts, and it's really how you work around it. And so I've learned so much from them.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to On Call with Insignia, where you go on call with leaders innovating the future of Southeast Asia's internet and digital economy, as we like to call it, as innovation. I'm your host, Paolo Aquino. I think that intro should be updated for this episode in particular, because as we mentioned in part one, Intellect is very much a global company impacting mental health care for lives across the world. And I have with me the VP for Partnerships and Solutions for Intellect, Cassandra Loh, having such a great conversation about how Intellect has been bridging a lot of these gaps in different markets from Japan to the US, really by virtue of its ability to localize. And I think a lot of this whole localization has its roots in this synergy of having both a B2C and a kind of B2B kind of value proposition, where I think Theo, the CEO, once described it as, with the B2C, you have people gaining awareness and through this app, and eventually they would recommend it at being employed. Some of them being employees would recommend it to their bosses, and it would go higher up, or some of them might be bosses themselves or leaders themselves, and then they would want to get the B2B solution as well, ensure it gets rolled out throughout their whole organization as well. But yeah, I thought that was always an interesting aspect of Intellect from the get-go. So I wanted to get your take on this synergy between the B2C, B2B. How has it helped? You've touched on it a little bit earlier. How has it helped with your work in partnerships? And what does it mean for Intellect moving forward as a global company?
Yeah, to me, honestly, B2B or B2C, fundamentally, we're serving the user. Of course, there are certain things that we understand the middle B, the businesses need, whether it's aggregated data, better insights. And these are some of the solutions that we push forward. Better trainings, workshops, mental health first aid training. These are solutions that are targeted at workforce. And so definitely we have a whole team that looks at how can we value add our services for the business. So for example, we have a real-time dashboard that benefits the business, because now instead of relying on a yearly employee engagement survey only and thinking of solutions to intervene based on the employee engagement survey of last year for next year, that is really very reactive compared to what we can offer them, which is a real-time dashboard on the well-being, the utilization, the engagement of the workforce. So this is an example of a solution that's targeted at the business. But at the end of the day, what we care a lot about is the users of Intellect's solution, whether it's the clinic, whether it's in-person care, whether it's the app, whether it's the virtual care, or even the helpline. To us, the user's experience is extremely important, and that is undifferentiated whether it's B2C or B2B2C. So I would say we develop a lot of solutions for our users. So I think earlier I've spoken a little bit about how we create a lot of solutions for mothers who have just discharged from the hospital. That was a B2C conversation because it was for hospitals to give to their patients. So it was more direct to patient kind of service. However, we realized that this exactly so suitable for any company or any organizations because their employees would also have gone through the same maternity phase, would have gone through the same parenting transition. And so what we've created for our B2C market is very applicable to our B2B market as well. And so now a lot of what we plan and strategize to do have much synergies between the B2C and B2B.
Yeah, a lot of, say, like a problem statement from B2C and getting a solution there bleeds into kind of the B2B2C side as well, rethinking ways of doing things that maybe have been institutionalized and rethinking. I think that even leads into a conversation about maternity leave, even, right? What is the right amount of maternity leave? And you did mention about how B2B really gives you, aggregates a lot of data, a lot of insights. I think one of the exercises or one of the initiatives recently that Intellect put out, this whole internet dimensions report, is really a fruit of this, coming in from the B2C app and then aggregating it across the different kind of industries that you serve, B2B. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that whole report. What does it mean for you, for the partnerships that you have? Is it something that a lot of strategic partners actually refer to now and look at? And is it a like a talking point in a lot of the conversations that you
Oh,
have?
for sure. For sure. It's been the most talked about report. It's already July right now, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we're asking for
It was
the
back
report.
in February,
I
March,
think
right?
because
When it, when it was released. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I think it's because we were able to capture such data because of how the app was created. And we have such a big user base right now that the report has a lot more weight when it comes to industries, when it comes to segmenting by countries. And from there, we have so many experts within the company that can lend so much insight as to why might the report look this way or why might the statistics look that way. And so people have been really interested in reading the benchmark report. What's next for the benchmark report is how can we bring these benchmarks into the dashboard so that everyday B2B companies will be able to understand their results a bit better. So what we wanted and what we challenged the product team and the clinical team is, so what if my engagement score is low? Maybe it's just an industry thing, right? What if everybody in this industry particularly are less engaged? Is there room, again, is there room for more nuance rather than to say, oh, your engagement is low, you're not doing enough? This benchmark report will actually help and will continue to refine it with more and more data to be able to provide this is what the industry, your industry look like with regard to engagement, and this is where you fare. And that really helps organizations understand and where they're doing and how they're doing a lot better than just a singular score.
With that understanding, I guess it also helps build, I guess, trust or kind of credibility in what Intellect is doing as well, because you do have this kind of depth of insight, and the scale of it actually lends more credence to the whole localization kind of
Yeah,
ability
for
as
sure.
well. And one thing I wanted to ask is, it's one thing to set up these partnerships, get into these conversations, win them over with this Intellect Dimensions report. It's another thing to actually keep these partnerships going across multiple years, really show them the results of this partnership. Like, how do you approach customer success or partner success when it comes to this, when it comes to Intellect?
Yeah, when it comes to partners, I always tell my teams, I wouldn't want to be your partner and it's always a one-way street. And so we engage our partners very regularly and we put ourselves in our partners' shoes all the time to understand what is a win for them. And now, in fact, just a meeting before this, my team members are actually asking, why are they doing this? What is it in it for them? What is the win for them? You know, because they're trained now, all of us, we want it to be a two-way street. We want this to be a long-term partnership. So whether we push out a program together, whether we brainstorm together, it is instinctive for us to look at it from both sides to find a win solution that benefits all parties. And I firmly believe that there are solutions that, you know, that will be able to satisfy all parties involved. And that takes a lot more brainstorming, a lot more experience, but definitely something that can be done and we have done. And therefore, a lot of these partners have been with us since day one. And our partnership just grows stronger and stronger. And yeah, again, so grateful for them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, especially when you have partners that come in inbound and you just accept that, oh, they came in because they probably like what we're doing. But then it's easy to just forget about what's in it for them as well
Yeah,
in that whole conversation, especially when you get
yeah.
these inbound kind of partnerships.
Yeah. So we at Intellect we have a team that actually really looks after our partners, and really the whole role of doing that is to keep them engaged and to continue to share insights and to continue to innovate and collaborate together. And you're right, that's extremely important.
And you did mention, I think, many times across the different examples you gave that you do work a lot with other, like a product team, technical team as well. Like, how do you manage the relationships with those teams? To and obviously you hear a lot of demands and insights from the partners. You also see a lot of things on the ground with users and customers. How do you try to keep them sane and keep them level-headed and prioritize the right things so that you're able to still deliver as well on what's best for partners and what's best for the users?
Yeah, Paulo, actually, my response to the previous question is the same for this. At the end
Mm,
of the day, for all of my colleagues, again, it needs to be a win to understand where they're coming from, what their motivation is, what their OKRs are, and aligning it is extremely important. At Intellect, the team is very tight. The leadership team is very tight. Our teams work very closely with one another. And so it's really a collaborative team. We just come down together, three, four of us, whoever is involved, and really see how prioritized this is. Do we need a deal breaker to come in and say, this is how important this is in relation to other things? And at the end of the day, what we want is what's best for Intellect and what's best for our users. And so with that, fundamentally, we could easily shift our OKRs if this is more important at this point. And as a startup, being agile that way is also very important. I would say it's both top down and bottom up. We encourage our teams to always collaborate. We have many kind of projects that requires multi-teams collaboration, so they are used to collaborating. And then top down, the leaders lead by examples. We ensure that we are never silo in everything that we do. We always make sure that everybody is aware, is involved, and have a say in how things are done, but yet also respect the executive decision maker for a particular project. I think that just makes working together much easier and much more enjoyable.
And yeah, I think in the search perhaps of an anecdote, and move on to my favorite corner, the make or break corner. Since you joined Intellect, maybe you could share with us what is the biggest kind of make or break moment of your journey? Yeah, as building like the partnerships and growing into this role at Intellect.
I think it was when IHH told me, yes, we're going ahead to be a strategic investor and strategic partner.
Was this something that you had like pushed led from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
So after I joined Intellect, I pulled the strings together. The corporate venture team that's looking at investment was the team that I used to belong to, and my
Mm-hmm.
fellow colleagues were still there. I think we've built a lot of trust as well. They knew how I understood the market, understood the ecosystem, and that probably also helped in a lot of the decision making. Of course, it's not just me, the entire team also showed its credibility, its value, but really going back and being on the other side right now, thinking of why you should invest in Intellect, and also explaining to the team then who weren't that familiar with healthcare, why should we have IHH on board as a strategic investor. I think that was really a memorable thing for me. It took a while, but having that connection built, the bridge built, and then finally being able to not only be strategic partners, but to be able to provide Intellect to all 20,000 employees across IHH markets. That's very meaningful to me because I've been in IHH for 10 years, and to see IHH embrace this and say, yes, our employees need a good solution and we're going to invest in it. To me, I'm also very proud. And Dr. Prem, I don't know if the group CEO actually won the CEO of the Year award in one of the well-being awards. I was in the ballroom when he was awarded that, and he went on TV after that, national TV, to say to cite various examples of how they care about employees' well-being in IHH. And of course, Intellect was one of the solutions that was mentioned. I just felt so proud of how much IHH has done for its employees and how far Intellect has come in terms of building this partnership with IHH. So I think that would be hands down the most memorable for me right now.
Mhm. Yeah, that's certainly a huge effort. And yeah, I think that definitely, I guess, changes the game as well for Intellect in terms of what is able to show the rest of the world that it can deploy on this kind of scale. Hopefully, we'll see more of these down the line. Speaking of which, like, what are you most excited about when it comes to Intellect these days? Like, what I guess keeps you up at night, or in a good way, perhaps? Yeah.
There's so much that we want to do, and right now it's really how there's so much that I want to do, that we want to do. And sometimes I got to be very careful when I bring an idea to Theo because he's, let's do it. And I'm like, let's prioritize a little bit. We have already gotten a very good step in when it comes to B2B. So one is how can we expand that beyond Asia, APAC to global, to be on the global stage? I think that's really exciting. What is required? What more do we need to understand? Do we need to understand their payer model, their insurance model, their healthcare model? It's a constant learning, right? Because it all falls into place. The whole benefits scheme or play in different markets is important for us to understand, to know where we fit in. So that's definitely one part. And then the second part is definitely the entire healthcare side of things, the clinics, the ecosystem, the insurers, the integration, doing it in Singapore as a first start. How do we bring this to the different markets in the next 12 months? I think, those are really exciting projects.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of bringing things that you've done in Singapore to other markets. Yeah, because I see a lot of things happening in the Singapore market, and yeah, I just can't wait to see it in other places as well. You did mention something interesting that I wanted to get into, which is like your work dynamic with Theo. Which
Is
ideas
he
is
gonna
like
listen to this?
yeah, hopefully not. But yeah, no, you had a conversation with Theo. You reached out to him initially to partner with Intellect from the IHH kind of perspective, and now you've been working with him for the past 2+ years. Yeah, how would you describe that dynamic that you have? Is there anything that you think? What have you learned from him, and then maybe what have you rubbed off on him in this time that you've been working together?
Yeah, no, I'm saying this really from my heart, not because Theo's gonna be listening to this, but Theo really leads by example. I think he has been really a champion when it comes to being empathetic but still decisive. He has struck a very nice balance between being a fellow co-worker, the empathy that he has, with being a leader and bringing us together and pushing us along, even when sometimes it really gets tough. Theo's endurance rubs off everybody. His optimism. I think I just saw an interview recently that he said something about being delusional. That makes a lot of sense because sometimes that naive delusion rubs off all of us who have been in the industry for a while now, and we're like, are you sure this is gonna work? And that does wrap off, but he journeys with us. And I've worked with a lot of startups in my time in the corporate ventures page, and I always tell Theo that what's the biggest difference between him and many others that I've met before is how he still, no matter how big Intellect grows or how busy it is, he still leads with a heart and he still cares for his people at the end of the day. And some of the values that he holds true, he holds them all the way, regardless of where the company is at or whatever challenges we were facing. Nobody, I think, is afraid to fail in Intellect. I think I can speak for everyone because it's so collaborative. We make a decision and we back each other up. And even if we fail, we pick up, we move. And that's the spirit of a startup that I think Theo has successfully built for Intellect. And that's why all of us are comfortable working here. We're willing to push further and take risks together.
Yeah, who knew that a mental health care startup working there would be good for your mental health as well?
I
Uh,
know, he walks the talk.
yeah, now we move on to our rapid fire round. So some quick questions to cool off after
That's
our,
the most scary
pretty
part.
deep pretty deep conversation. Um yeah, so first things first, like what superpower of any one of your C-level colleagues, doesn't have to be Theo, would you want to have?
I think it might be our VP of Clinical, Dr. Oliver's
Mm,
ability to make people feel comfortable talking to him.
it comes
That's
with his
something
job,
that
I guess.
yeah, it's his job, but I'm so impressed because he switches that off, like he switches his commercial or VP hat off, and immediately he becomes a friend, and everybody just feels comfortable talking to him. The empathy that he has, that's really a superpower to me.
If you could be invited to produce a Netflix series, what would be the title of the show?
I think it will be a day at a time. I think what I've grown to learn, and thanks to all the partners who have been sharing their life stories with me as well, is how everybody's successes really is built a day at a time. And if I could really capture all these conversations and feature how whoever great that we know, whether in commercial world, sports world, it all took a day at a time. I think I would love to produce something like that.
Actually, yeah, I had a follow-up question. What's the most unexpected thing that you learned from a partner or like a partner conversation or
What I learned is that every single person, no matter how high ranking they are, have the same self-doubt. And when I share my self-doubts with them and they become vulnerable and share with me, sometimes I'm just like, really? But you're like a group CEO of a huge organization. And I realize everybody does have self-doubts, and it's really how you work around it. And so I've learned so much from them.
we're all human at the end of the day? Looking back now, what's a skill, could be a soft skill or hard skill, you believe you should have learned back in your time as a student?
I think the ability to say no, I think that's something in Asia, especially, we are not really ready to do. And I think if I knew how to do it better, I would have avoided a lot of uncomfortable situations.
And if there's something you could automate in your job just by wishing for it, what aspect of your role would that be?
100% claims. Like my claims, my team's claims, I know how important it is for them that I approve them, but it really just takes up so much time. And so definitely claims.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably not even a hard thing to automate. So maybe somebody out there is listening.
Maybe, yeah. Please share your solution with me.
Yeah, yeah. If you could pick anyone alive or dead to be your 24/7 executive coach, who would it be? And what's one thing you would want to learn from them?
Oh, I love this question, and I love to be able to say the answer. And my answer is Kobe Bryant.
Oh, okay.
So I've always been in sports in school, and I've always looked up to him as a young student that's training in my sport. A lot of what he says, I think I still remember them and I still practice them. Things like you don't rest in the middle, you rest at the end, the obsession to perfect your craft. These were things that I've been trained in my youth. But actually, I think even in the workforce, experience can be gained, but the attitude is something that I think we constantly need to be reminded. And I think if he was my executive coach, I think with whatever adversities that come, I think he would be able to remind me of the important values. And very importantly, being a team leader right now is also how do we see the good in every team member. And I think he's also very big on that and understanding every member of the team and understanding how they're motivated differently. And I think that's also another very big learning point for him.
Yeah, it's the first time Kobe Bryant has come up for this question. So
I was excited to say
yeah,
his name.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for giving thanks for giving that answer. How do you celebrate wins at work?
So first, I would thank God because I believe that doesn't come in a silver platter. I really thank God for whatever blessings that He has given. But beyond that, I always believe in celebrating as a team. I might do that a bit too much, but any small win, big win. We just had lunch today. We had lunch yesterday. Small wins like that, getting the team together and celebrating everybody's contribution to me. That's the most meaningful part about celebrating any big or small win.
What's your go-to activity to de-stress? I felt like I should ask this because we're because you're into
So,
that.
for me, I have two young children, 5 and 1. It's insane because they have very different
Right,
needs.
right. I have
But
to
for me,
localize for
but for me, the ability to compartmentalize and switch off. So when I'm home from 7 p.m. at night till 10 p.m., it's children's time. Unless absolutely necessary, I really switch off and I spend all that 3 hours with my children. Most of my weekends are spent left for my kids, and that really helps me to distress. And of course, they are my happy pills.
yeah, I think I've had this question for a couple of parents before, and they always talk about the importance of time, like setting those like time boundaries and being able to switch on and off as needed. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask is also about you also have an MC background.
Ah.
And I was wondering what's the most memorable or I don't know, maybe even craziest event that you've had to host.
So I host a lot of events for the last 15 years, maybe. I don't have one most memorable one, but one of my favorite events to host is what we call in Singapore the Education Award ceremony. And in this ceremony, parents will bring their children and they get certain education award from the Singapore government. And
The children, right? Not the
yes,
parent.
and the
Okay.
children come up.
Okay.
And I always like to do this final thing where I ask the children to stand up, look at their parents who came together with them today, and give them a big hug. And like Asia, people are a little bit shy. They're but they do it. And I see parents with tears in their eyes. And I think teaching children to have that gratitude by looking at the parents and how proud they are, it always gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. So that's one of my favorite events to host. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember doing something similar for my high school graduation where we asked to
Oh,
not hug but shout thank you.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was memorable for sure. And finally, yeah, we did talk about this before starting the show. If there's a podcast you could start, what would the podcast be about? Because I feel like you would be a good host for a
Oh, thank
podcast.
you.
Yeah.
I'm such a terrible procrastinator. I had a 2024 goal, and that's to start a podcast called, okay, nobody has heard this before, but I'm just gonna say it here. It's
Wow.
called
Okay. Hot.
Test Coffee
Fresh
Chat.
off the press.
Yeah, so like Test Coffee Chat. Because in my role, I have so many coffee chats with so many people.
Mm.
And a lot of times I wish I could just record like what we're talking about because they share so much about their journey, their experience. So I really want to do a Test Coffee Chat to share with everybody what people have been sharing with me, and I've learned so much from them. I just haven't started.
Somebody in the Intellect team just needs to hand you a recorder.
Or somebody out there, you want me to lead your podcast, I'll be so happy to do so.
Yeah, maybe start with Theo. I don't know. I'm sure he's such a yes man. he'll probably do it at a moment's notice with you. But yeah, on that note, thanks so much for coming on call with us, Cass, and yeah, thank you for sharing with us, really getting into the weeds of how Intellect really makes it work, as complex of operation that it does across these different markets, but also sharing also your own personal experiences growing in Intellect, working with the leading your team as well, and working with the other teams at this company. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. If you do want to have a longer conversation with Cass about maybe bringing Intellect into your organization as well, do reach out to her LinkedIn, linking it in the description below. And yeah, if you want to join the Intellect team as well, jobs are posted. I'll leave the link as well to jobs in the description below. I'm sure they're hiring across roles, across markets. Yeah, everywhere. They're everywhere, exactly. So you be sure to look out for that. And yeah, stay tuned for our next episode. But in the meantime, thanks so much again, Cass, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Paolo.